All right, so I want to take a close look at this breakdown. We've been talking about this breakdown the last couple of days, the fascinating Nico Collins versus Garrett Wilson breakdown. And look, we are about a week away from camp. It's the season of comparing. It's the season of talking. When you see a contract, you kind of compare it to another. And when the Garrett Wilson contract came down for 4 years, 130 million with 90 million guaranteed, my immediate localized instinct was to compare it to the Nico Collins contract, because those are two guys that are considered top 10, top 15, top 12, whatever receivers. And there is a wide range of debate in it. I think there's a number of variables that we'll get to, but you look at the contract with Garrett Wilson, it's damn sure not a bargain. He is in his first 3 seasons, he's one of 5 receivers in NFL history to have 80 catches and 1,000 yards. And the company that he's in is elite. On the other hand, you look at Nico Collins, and Nico Collins last year signed an extension that was for 3 years, 72.75 million with 52 million guaranteed. And immediately you think, okay, well, that's kind of a bargain for Nick Caserio. But the more you dive into it, which I did, you kind of wonder, is it really a bargain? And we're going to play the game. Who would you rather have, Nico Collins or Garrett Wilson? Now, when talking about Nico Collins, you kind of want to be fair to Nico Collins, and you want to bring up the fact that in his first 2 seasons in the NFL, he did not have very good quarterback play. The quarterback play was awful. And in the last 2 seasons, you look at the difference in production from Nico Collins when he's on the field. In the last 2 seasons with CJ Stroud, 2,306 of his 3,230 yards have occurred. 148 of his 218 receptions. This is just crazy. And 15 of his 18 touchdowns. So you do want to address that. You do want to acknowledge that Nico Collins early on did not have a good quarterback. And since he's had an elite quarterback, he's put up elite production. However, here's the reality. If we're going to be fair to Nico Collins, I kind of got to be fair to Garrett Wilson as well. And the early Nico Collins QB situation has been constant for Garrett Wilson. Look at this list of quarterbacks that Garrett Wilson has played with during his time with the Jets. He played with Zach Wilson. He played with Mike White. He played with Aaron Rodgers, the ghost of Aaron Rodgers. He played with the ghost of Joe Flacco, Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle, Tyrod Taylor, and Chris Streveler, who I barely remember who the hell that is. So the production for Garrett Wilson, it's been all time 1 of 5, despite the fact he hasn't had quarterbacks. If you divide this just into the 3 seasons that Garrett Wilson has been in the league, on the surface, it still kind of favors Nico Collins. But you look at the games missed, 14 by Collins in the last 3 years. Garrett Wilson hasn't missed a game. The receptions, the yards, TDs, yards per carry, it can be a little bit misleading. And if you're leaning Collins, then you're going to say, well, per game, on a per game basis, it's not really close. But can you really go by a per game basis when you have a 4-year sample size of someone not being able to stay on the field? And maybe that goes back to why this contract was what it was with Nico Collins. And this is where it gets really, really fascinating. Because a lot of times when a guy enters the league 1 year before another guy, you kind of have to go back. You have to talk about the variables that we've been talking about. But when we do that, we're actually doing Nico Collins, not Garrett Wilson, a favor. Because as we look at the career stats, and this kind of puts it in perspective, they've actually played the exact same amount of career games. Nico Collins in 4 years has missed a season plus worth of games. He's missed 17 games. Garrett Wilson hasn't missed a game yet. You remember that game where Nico Collins got hurt against the Jets and CJ Stroud, and we were talking about the playing surface and how dangerous it is? Garrett Wilson hasn't missed a game playing on that. And Jets fans insist that he plays banged up, he plays hurt, and he still produces. So if we're just going to go by career yards, and we're not just going to skew things in Collins' direction, and we're just going to go 51 games versus 51 games, the yards favor Garrett Wilson, 3,249 to 3,230. So it is close, but this is a 51 game sample size. The receptions favor Garrett Wilson by 61, and the touchdowns favor Collins 18-14. So just on the surface, the career stats in total games, they favor Garrett Wilson everywhere outside of touchdowns. And in 2 of those years, a large chunk, Nico Collins has had CJ Stroud. Now, then we get into what is typically an imaginary debate where you say, well, if this guy had that, or if that guy had this, and if this guy was throwing to that guy, but it's not really that crazy of a hypothetical, because the guy that Nico Collins, we saw those first 2-year stats. Let's pull those up one more time, or the last 2-year stats. 2,306 of the 3,230 yards, 148 of the 218 receptions, 15 of the 18 touchdowns. That guy happened to play with Garrett Wilson at Ohio State. And Garrett Wilson balled out to the point where he was the number 10 overall pick in the draft. So we've actually seen him play with that guy. In the NFL, he hasn't been able to do that. Now he's with Justin Fields, which doesn't scream production for the wide receiver position, but we've seen what we've seen with Garrett Wilson. So when it comes to these types of discussions, I don't think you can completely dismiss that large of a sample size when it comes to amount of games missed. But I do think that Nick Caserio did get a good contract out of Nico Collins, at least market value and at least appropriate, which is kind of rare with some of the contracts we've seen with Nick Caserio. Did the Jets get a bargain for Garrett Wilson? I would say probably not, but who would you rather have? I do have a quote from CJ Stroud. I was 10 feet away from him when he said this. And this is a quote from CJ Stroud. And he's always talked good about Nico too, but he said, Garrett Wilson's the most talented player he has played with. And if you think about the guys that CJ Stroud has played with, that is high, high praise. So the verdict here, who would you rather have? I'm not trying to sit on the fence. And it's obvious that if you're drafting a fantasy football team, you got to go with Nico Collins, probably because of the numbers that he puts up with CJ Stroud. But you do so with the understanding that he's probably going to miss a few games, most likely. It's happened all the time. Garrett Wilson, 3-0 in playing every game each season. Nico Collins is 0-4, and he's missed 17 games. But if we're just talking about the contracts, like if we're just talking about the value of the contracts, given the situation the Jets are in, I don't think they got a bargain with Garrett Wilson. And you can make a case whether the Texans got a bargain or not for Nico Collins, but it's a 3-year commitment. It's a good football team. The contracts, I would rather have Nico Collins on that contract, although you can't go wrong with Garrett Wilson. Now, if the contracts were the same, and all things aside, give me the guy that's going to play every single game. Give me the guy that we haven't seen yet with the quarterback at the NFL level. We've seen Nico Collins with the quarterback. We haven't seen Garrett Wilson, but it's an interesting discussion. It's an interesting debate. And it's one of those things that kind of happens as the season comes down. Subscribe, like, right along. Always remember, training camp, 8 days away. We'll be on the scene. And when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Nico or Garrett Wilson?